at John F. Kennedy International Airport, where thousands of travelers moved through terminals every day. Special Agent Daniel Carter of U.S. Customs and Border Protection had trained himself to look beyond the ordinary. Years of experience had taught him that smugglers rarely looked like criminals. They blended in, smiling businessmen, nervous students, even families on vacation. What set them apart were the details, the hesitation in their answers, the flicker of fear in their eyes, the inconsistencies in their paperwork. That morning, Daniel stood at the arrivals hall, sipping bitter black coffee, when he noticed a man wheeling a sleek black suitcase. The man was in his mid-30s, well-dressed in a navy suit, and walked with the confidence of someone who had done this before. His name, according to the flight manifest, was Victor Morales, arriving from Bogota, Colombia. Victor handed over his passport with a polite smile, but Daniel's instincts were triggered. The story didn't add up. Victor claimed he was in New York for business meetings, but his documents showed no scheduled appointments, no company address, and a vague return date. Daniel let him pass but made a mental note. Something wasn't right. Later that day, in the surveillance room, he reviewed footage. Victor's suitcase looked unusually heavy for its size, and his nervous glances toward customs officers stood out. Daniel shared his concerns with his partner, Agent Lisa Monroe. "I don't like it," Daniel muttered. "Everything about him screams too smooth. Smugglers always think dressing sharp makes them invisible." Lisa leaned back in her chair, analyzing the footage. Could be drugs, could be cash, could even be something bigger. But if we move too soon, we lose the whole network. That was the dilemma. Arresting Victor immediately might uncover contraband, but it would only scratch the surface. Daniel suspected Victor wasn't working alone. He was part of a larger smuggling ring. If they played this right, they could dismantle the entire operation. Daniel made his choice. We're not just catching a mule. We're setting up a planned arrest. Let's follow him, track his contacts, and see how deep this goes. And so it began. The careful surveillance, the slow tightening of the net. The smugglers thought they were in control, but in reality, the trap was already being set. Victor Morales didn't know it, but from the moment he stepped out of JFK Airport, he was no longer alone. Agents Daniel Carter and Lisa Monroe had initiated what they called the Shadow Walk, a covert tale designed to keep eyes on a suspect without raising suspicion. Victor hailed a cab and gave an address in Queens. Lisa, behind the wheel of an unmarked sedan, followed from a distance. Daniel scanned the GPS tracker discreetly attached to Victor's suitcase by another officer during inspection. Every move Victor made was now under watch. The cab stopped at a modest 3-story apartment building. Victor carried his black suitcase inside, staying only 20 minutes before emerging with a different bag. Smaller, but still suspiciously heavy. He then called a rideshare and headed toward Manhattan. "Quick swap," Daniel muttered, watching through binoculars. Classic smuggler move. He offloads the product, repackages it, and makes it harder to trace. Lisa kept her eyes on the road. Question is, what did he leave behind, and who's inside that apartment? They relayed the address to the DEA strike team, who began monitoring the building. Meanwhile, Daniel and Lisa tailed Victor to a high-end hotel in Midtown. Surveillance cameras captured him meeting with 2 other men in the lobby. One with a briefcase, the other scanning the room nervously. Daniel recognized the nervous man. That's Jorge Alvarez, known courier. Picked up twice before, but never convicted. Always slips through. The three men spoke briefly, then moved upstairs. The agents couldn't follow without blowing their cover, so they switched to listening devices planted in hotel staff areas. Snippets of conversation came through. Words like shipment, delivery, and tonight. Daniel's pulse quickened. They're planning a drop. If we can catch them in the act, we'll have more than possession. We'll have conspiracy. Back in Queens, DEA agents discreetly entered the apartment Victor had visited. What they found confirmed Daniel's instincts. Hidden compartments in the walls, packaging materials, and residue consistent with narcotics. The pieces were coming together. Victor wasn't just a traveler with suspicious luggage. He was a key player in a smuggling pipeline that stretched from Colombia to New York. Lisa turned to Daniel as they sat parked near the hotel. We've got them boxed in. The only question now is, do we let this play out further or move in tonight? Daniel's jaw tightened. The risk of waiting was high, but the reward could be even greater. The decision would define the entire operation. The briefing room inside the Federal Task Force office buzzed with tension. Maps of New York lit up the digital board, with red pins marking Victor's apartment in Queens, the Midtown Hotel, and several suspected drop-off points across the city. Agent Daniel Carter stood at the front, his sleeves rolled up, eyes sharp. We've confirmed this isn't a one-man show. Victor Morales is tied to Jorge Alvarez, a known courier, and a third unidentified male who we believe is the handler. The hotel meeting suggests a handoff is scheduled for tonight, Lisa Monroe added, clicking through surveillance photos. The Queens apartment has residue consistent with cocaine. Based on packaging and movement patterns, we're looking at a multi-million-dollar shipment. If we move too early, we get a couple of kilos and low-level players. But if we let this play out, we take down the pipeline. The room fell silent as the weight of the decision sank in. Moving in tonight meant high risk. Smugglers were unpredictable, and one wrong move could lead to bloodshed or a blown case. Daniel pointed at the hotel. Here's the plan. Morales leaves with Alvarez and the handler. They'll head to a warehouse near the docks. We've traced the license plate of their driver to a known shell company. We'll set up a perimeter, keep eyes on every exit, and move in the second the product changes hands. The DEA strike team leader, a broad-shouldered man named Collins, leaned forward. And if they split up, Lisa didn't hesitate. We shadow both. Air support is on standby. We're not letting anyone walk tonight. The plan unfolded with precision. Undercover agents disguised as delivery drivers, dock workers, and even late-night joggers were stationed across the city. Surveillance vans hummed quietly on side streets, monitoring every move. By nightfall, the trap was set. Victor, dressed in another sharp suit, exited the hotel with his suitcase. Jorge Alvarez flanked him, the handler just behind. They climbed into a black SUV and drove toward the East River. Daniel and Lisa followed 2 cars back, hearts steady but alert. Every mile brought them closer to the climax of weeks of surveillance. Lisa glanced at Daniel. You ready for this? Daniel's jaw clenched. I've been ready since the moment he walked off that plane. The smuggler thought he was in control. But what he didn't know was that every step was leading him straight into the jaws of a carefully planned arrest. The night air at the East River docks was heavy with mist. the water rippling under dim floodlights. Shipping containers towered above the cracked pavement, creating a maze of shadows, perfect cover for both criminals and law enforcement. The black SUV carrying Victor Morales rolled slowly into the dockyard, headlights cutting through the fog. Daniel Carter and Lisa Monroe, parked 2 blocks away in an unmarked sedan, listened to the chatter through their earpieces. Surveillance teams hidden among the containers called out positions. Target vehicle entering the lot, 3 occupants, driver staying put. Victor stepped out first carrying the suitcase. Jorge Alvarez followed, scanning the perimeter nervously. The handler, tall and composed, adjusted his coat before signaling to 2 dock workers, who weren't workers at all, but part of his crew. From behind a container, another man wheeled out a crate stamped with false shipping labels. Daniel's gut tightened. This was it, the exchange. Victor opened the suitcase, revealing tightly wrapped packages. Alvarez slid the crate open, showing bundles of cash. The men spoke in low voices, their outlines visible through binoculars. Product confirmed, whispered Agent Collins from the strike team. Standing by for your call. Lisa's hand hovered over the radio trigger. Her eyes met Daniel's. If we wait too long, they scatter. If we go now, we get them clean. Daniel exhaled, watching as the handler reached for the suitcase. That was the moment. Execute now. The night erupted. Floodlights snapped on, blinding the smugglers. Federal agents swarmed from all directions, weapons drawn. Federal agents, drop your weapons, hands where we can see them. Victor froze, suitcase still in hand. Alvarez bolted toward the SUV, but 2 agents tackled him before he reached the door. The handler drew a pistol, firing wildly into the night. Bullets ricocheted off metal containers as agents took cover. Daniel and Lisa sprinted forward, Daniel ducking behind a crate before shouting, "Put it down! You're surrounded!" For a moment, the handler hesitated, chest heaving, eyes darting. Then, realizing there was no escape, he dropped the gun and raised his hands. Victor, trembling, muttered, "This wasn't supposed to happen," as agents cuffed him and shoved him into a waiting van. The entire operation, weeks in the making, had ended in minutes. The smuggling ring was dismantled, their operation exposed, and their freedom gone. But for Daniel and Lisa, one final step remained, making sure every piece of evidence would hold up in court. The dockyard was silent again by dawn, except for the hum of generators and the shuffle of agents cataloging evidence. Crates of cash, packets of narcotics, cell phones, and ledgers were neatly lined up on tarps. Each item was bagged, photographed, and logged, pieces of a puzzle that told the story of an international smuggling operation finally brought down. Victor Morales sat handcuffed inside a federal transport van, his once perfect suit crumpled and streaked with dirt. The arrogance he had displayed at the airport was gone, replaced by a hollow stare. Jorge Alvarez had already broken down, begging for leniency, while the handler sat stone-faced, clearly resigned to what awaited him in court. Agent Daniel Carter stood beside Lisa Monroe, watching the sunrise creep over the skyline. For weeks they had lived and breathed this case, tracking every lead, every movement, waiting for the right moment. Now, with the smugglers in custody, a wave of relief washed over them. "Feels good, doesn't it?" Lisa said quietly, her arms crossed. Daniel nodded, but didn't smile. "Yeah, but you and I both know the work isn't done. Someone higher up sent Morales. This was just one branch of the tree." She exhaled, knowing he was right. Smuggling rings were hydras. Cut off one head, and another often appeared. But tonight, at least, they had made a dent. By mid-morning, the news broke. Headlines flashed across national outlets. Massive drug smuggling operation foiled at New York dockyards. Customs agents seized millions in cash and narcotics. Cameras swarmed the courthouse as Victor, Alvarez, and the handler were led inside in shackles. Reporters shouted questions about cartel ties, international connections, and federal charges. The smugglers remained silent, flanked by attorneys already strategizing desperate defenses. Back at headquarters, the task force celebrated with strong coffee and weary smiles. But Daniel couldn't shake the image of Victor at the airport. So confident, so certain, he could slip through unnoticed. It was a reminder of how fragile security could be, and how vigilance was the only barrier between order and chaos. As he finally left the office that evening, Daniel paused at the exit. He thought about the choice he made at the beginning, holding back instead of making an immediate arrest. That patience had led to something bigger. Not just catching a smuggler, but dismantling a network. For him, that was the real victory. And he knew, without a doubt, that when the next smuggler tried to outsmart the system, he'd be ready. Thank you so much for watching this story till the end. I hope you enjoyed it and maybe even learned something from it. If you'd like to hear more stories like this, full of life lessons, drama, and emotions, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you'll never miss an update. Your support means the world, and it helps me keep bringing you more inspiring and unforgettable stories. Stay tuned, because more amazing stories are on the way.